Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a really complex and contentious story coming out of Pakistan. It revolves around a series of highly sensitive blasphemy cases. But the real story, at least according to our source material, isn't just about the accusations themselves. No, it's about an alleged entrapment scheme, claims of fabricated evidence, and a fierce battle to control the entire narrative.
Okay, so let's get right into it by defining a key term from our source: pornographic blasphemy. Now, this isn't some historical offense that's been on the books for centuries. The source describes it as a new and, you can imagine, incredibly inflammatory type of alleged blasphemy that apparently popped up in Pakistan between 2018 and 2021. We're talking about mixing pornographic content with sacred symbols and acts, stuff that was basically unheard of before.
So as more and more of these complaints started surfacing, the source explains that a dedicated cell was set up within Pakistan's Federal Investigation Agency, the FII. This was a big deal because it officially moved the whole issue into the legal system. It led to a whole bunch of cases heading to the trial courts, and many of them were backed up with digital forensic evidence pulled from phones and social media accounts.
For a little while, these trials were just proceeding, moving through the normal court process like any other case. But then, the source claims the entire story just took a sharp turn. In the middle of 2024, a completely new narrative was suddenly thrown into the mix.
This timeline really pinpoints the moment everything changed. You see the cases moving along, and then, bam, July 2024. An online outlet called Fact Focus publishes a leaked police report. All of a sudden, the public story wasn't about blasphemy anymore, it was about entrapment. And here's the crucial claim the source makes. Before this leak, not one single defendant had ever argued in court that they were entrapped. Think about that. The defense didn't exist until the report was leaked.
So this new narrative, this idea of an entrapment conspiracy, it's all built on a few key pieces of evidence. What the source material we're looking at today does is try to take those pieces and systematically dismantle them, arguing they just don't hold up when you look a little closer.
First up, let's talk about that leaked report that really lit the fuse. The claim was explosive. A gang was operating, framing innocent people. But the source points to a Lahore High Court hearing that tells a very different story. There, the Deputy Inspector General of the very same special branch apparently testified that this thing wasn't a formal investigation at all. He called it an uninvestigated source report. Basically, it was a tip, not a conclusion. All right, next piece of evidence. A report from Pakistan's National Commission for Human Rights, the NCHR. It made a really startling claim that a whopping 94% of the accused said they were entrapped. But our source alleges there's a huge contradiction here. It says that if you actually go and read the NCHR's own published interviews with the defendants, the very evidence for that conclusion, the story just isn't there. And here, we can really dig into what the source is talking about. It breaks down the 5 sample cases that the NCHR published. And look at the pattern. The interviews talk about meeting people online, getting called in by the FIA, even alleged torture. But what's missing? Time and time again, any mention of the specific blasphemous entrapment scheme. That idea that someone sends you blasphemous stuff and then gets you arrested. The very thing the NCHR report claimed was happening to almost everyone. Then this number appeared, 134. It stood for the number of families who had apparently signed a joint application. They sent it to the Interior Ministry, and their demand was pretty simple: form a special commission to investigate all these entrapment claims. But, and this is a big but, the source alleges there was a major problem with this application. It claims the FII actually went and contacted the families that were listed. And what did they find? The vast majority said they'd never signed it or had even heard of it. The document itself had no signatures, no thumbprints. The FII's conclusion, in a report to the ministry, was that it was basically fraudulent, a fake document created to make the entrapment story look more credible. The NCHR report also had what seemed like a really powerful piece of testimony: an email supposedly sent directly from a prisoner inside the high-security Adiala jail. And get this, it was sent at 3:15 in the morning. But the source basically asks a common-sense question: how? It points out that Pakistani prison rules are strict. Inmates don't get email, they don't get internet, and they definitely don't get personal digital devices. It just raises a huge red flag about where that email really came from. Okay, so this begs a really big question, right? If these claims of a massive entrapment conspiracy are as shaky as the source suggests, then why? Why go to all this trouble? Why build this whole elaborate narrative? Well, the source material we're looking at proposes a very specific legal strategy as the real motive behind it all.
The source lays out this alleged four-step game plan. The end goal, it argues, isn't actually to prove innocence in a courtroom. No, it's much cleverer than that. The goal is to create a legal tool, a judicial commission, that brings all the ongoing trials to a screeching halt. And once the trials are stopped by the state itself, the defendants can argue, hey, you're delaying my trial, so I'm entitled to bail. And once they're out on bail, they're free to leave the country.
And to support this theory, the source points to what it claims is a real-world test case, a specific blasphemy case in Rawalpindi. It claims a co-accused person in that case was granted bail on these exact grounds. And what happened? The very next day, he was on a flight out of Pakistan and hasn't been back since.
So, with all these different threads laid out, we arrive at the source's final and pretty explosive overarching accusation.
When you connect all the dots, this is what the source concludes. It alleges that the forged application, the reports that it claims are misrepresented, and this whole push for a commission, it claims these are not just random events. It alleges they're part of a coordinated campaign by what it calls a secular nexus of activists, lawyers, and NGOs, all working together to derail these specific prosecutions.
And so, in the end, the source material frames this entire controversy as a choice between two very different realities. Is this a genuine human rights campaign trying to protect innocent people who've been caught up in a flawed and dangerous system? Or is it a coordinated strategy designed to deliberately subvert the course of justice? The source presents its case, but it leaves that final, crucial question hanging in the air. Where does the truth really lie?